Well, welcome everyone to today's episode. I am so excited. I've got a great guest that I've been just itching to talk to. So glad that he's here today. His name is Mark Kaler. He is Vice President of Education and Research for Mushroom Wisdom, a great company. But more importantly, we get to talk about an herb today, or a Chinese medicinal mushroom called lion's mane. And Mark, not only is it great to have you here, I can't wait for us to get started on the subject.
Well, thanks for having me here, and it's certainly a topic I love talking about. Hopefully we can do it in justice in the half hour that we have, because there's so much research, there's so much of a history behind most of these medicinal mushrooms that there's really a lot we can talk about.
Well, I've known about lion's mane for a long time, and I've talked about it before, but it's great to have a researcher on set to actually talk about just the amazing properties. But what I want to start off with the lion's mane is kind of give us some historical background on the actual mushroom itself, and then we'll just kind of move in today's scientific research and let everybody know how they can actually use it for themselves.
Well, let's be clear, lion's mane is not the mane from a lion. We want to be straight up front about that. It's actually a type of mushroom. It's an edible mushroom. It's been consumed in Asia for thousands and thousands of years. Has a mild kind of seafood flavor to it. So if you ever get a chance to cook with it, I'd encourage you to give it a try, because it's a lot of fun to cook with and things. But one of the original names for it in Japan was Yamabushitake. And it was named after these warrior monks that lived up in the mountains in medieval Japan. That were these fierce priest warriors, and they used to wear these little bushy, like pom-poms on their robes, and the pom-poms look exactly like this mushroom, because it's not your normal looking mushroom. It's not the little stem with the cap on top of it. Yeah. It's this kind of tangled web of almost a lion's mane kind of look to it, and it just matched their pom-poms. That's how it got its name.
Well, so were the warriors actually eating the lion's mane mushroom?
No, they had nothing to do with eating the mushroom, other than, it was just typical part of an Asian diet. It just had to do that it looked similar to the pom-poms that they wore.
Well, let's come into modern day with the lion's mane, because when someone reads some of the research on lion's mane, or they'll read an article, it's always linked to dementia, brain function. And what have you found by using the lion's mane in this area?
Well, traditionally it was actually used as a medicine, as a chi tonic for life, vitality, energy, drive, dynamism, keep the body going, immune support and things. But it's work that's been done over the last 20, 30 years that I think is most promising in that area of dementia and brain and nerve-related conditions. And it primarily revolved around a substance called nerve growth factor. Mm-hmm. And that was a substance that was discovered in the 50s, although researchers didn't really pay any attention to it for like 35 years or something. And they found that actually when you pump nerve growth factor directly into the brain of an Alzheimer's patient, that they were able to reverse Alzheimer's. And that's unheard of. You're not supposed to be able to do that.
That's what I've heard.
The problem is, who can walk around with a hole in their head pumping nerve growth factor? And first of all, it's very expensive. Second of all, the hole in the bread is going to lead itself to infection, and you're going to end up dying from that.
Right.
So they started looking for natural substances that would cross the blood-brain barrier, get into the brain, and stimulate the brain's own production of nerve growth factor. And lo and behold, they discovered that this mushroom, this lion's mane mushroom, was able to cross the blood-brain barrier and stimulate production of this nerve growth factor in the brain, which has these benefits for Alzheimer's and dementia.
Well, you bring up nerve growth factor, and for all the viewers out there, kind of just explain what nerve growth factor is, because it's something that we're actually born with, but after a while, we no longer produce it.
Yeah, nerve growth factor is a protein that is produced by neurons throughout your body, actually. And it's basically the repair, regeneration chemical that's produced. For years, you and I were just talking about how, they always thought once a neuron was dead or damaged, that's it. But
Right.
They found out, hey, that's not the case. Neurons will regrow just like everything else in the body. It just takes a lot longer. And the body's mechanism for triggering that repair, for maintaining the nerve cells in the body, and for regenerating them, is this substance called nerve growth factor, which works, in the brain and through the nerves throughout the whole body.
Now, wasn't it nerve growth factor, and correct me if I'm wrong, nerve growth factor, because we're born with it. And, as we grow from a baby to a small child to a teenager to adult, we have nerve growth factor going, because as we grow and we're growing taller, nerve growth factor is there. And you have to remember, people, if you're this big when you're born and you become 6 feet tall, the nerves have to grow along with that growth of the person, and that's where nerve growth factor actually comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good point. I mean, we're born this big, But by the time we leave, we're this
But
big,
then-
and all those nerves have to grow, regenerate. Connections that used to be a few inches sometimes now need to be many inches or feet sometimes even. So it's the body's mechanism for allowing for that growth and those connections, because that's the other important part with the brain is the brain's all about connections.
Right.
And it's when those connections start to malfunction and get destroyed or damaged, that's when all the problems start to happen.
Well, and like you had said, and I've talked about this before, how researchers truly believe that neurons could not be revived if there's death there. We couldn't even do any type of nerve regeneration. But as we get to be, let's say, 18 to 21, you hit 6 feet. That's as much as you're going to grow. The nerve growth factor really doesn't start to do anything anymore. It just kind of goes away. Is that how it actually
Well, it
acts?
certainly drops off. There's always
severely.
some nerve growth factor in it, because there's always that maintenance of the
Right.
of the neurons and things. And it's still fairly new discovery. They're finding that nerve growth factor may be important for the myelin sheath, which is the coating that protects the neurons.
Right.
So it has kind of some maintenance roles. And they're actually starting to discover that there may be applications to it as far as the immune system goes, cardiovascular system, that it's integrated in the system. It may be a misnomer to call it nerve growth factor because it's not just nerve related. It may have some other systemic benefits to it.
Well, as you were saying, how the researchers, basically knowing that Alzheimer's patients actually improved when you increased the nerve growth factor, but the researchers found out that you could only basically, like you said, drill a hole in the skull and basically put it into the brain, but they were looking for another way how to get growth, because nerve growth factor would not cross the blood-brain barrier if you took it orally. And this is where lion's mane comes into play.
Yeah, I think that's one of the ironies of the human body in a sense, is that the brain has this protective coating on it, which is essential because brain cells, very sensitive cells to the
Very
body. They can't
sensitive.
have a lot of free radicals in there to damage. Sugar levels can be really problematic for the brain and things. So it's got this protective shell around it. And one of the things that protective shell, the blood-brain barrier, does is it ironically keeps nerve growth factor out of it. Maybe that has a protective sense in the long run, we just don't know. So they needed something that would cross that blood-brain barrier, get into the brain, and stimulate it within the brain. And that's what was so intriguing and promising about the lion's mane mushroom.
Well, then how did the lion's mane actually affect nerve growth factor?
Well, there's a class of constituents in there called hericenones, and we don't want to get too chemical, I'm sure, for everybody.
Yeah.
But it's substances that are found in the lion's mane mushroom in the fruiting body, which is the above-ground portion, it's the part that we eat. And they found in a number of studies that by eating that, and they used it in soup and cookies, a number of different ways of delivery, that it actually crossed the blood-brain barrier and stimulated this production of nerve growth factor, and that's where you started to see these benefits that you would get, similar to if you were using the drug itself.